Hey, in the next few minutes, I'm going to be teaching you Python variables. You're going to be able to run code in your browser. There's no setup, no installation required. Links in the description. You will need a free account, but that's all you're going to need. This is one of our demos that we have at Server Academy. It's interactive. I'm just going to minimize these instructions because I'm here with you and I'm going to teach you how this works. First thing we're going to discuss is what is a variable. A variable is something that holds data. It's really that simple. There's different types of data that can be held in a variable. We'll get into that, but the basics are you create a variable and you assign it a value, which is what we're going to do here. So in this little example that we have here, we have a game at the bottom with a cannon, and then we have two variables that are assigned up here at the top. Now, this is Python code. And one of the cool things about Python is that it can interact with things in the real world. That's why Python's so popular, right? In this example, you're controlling a cannon, which is kind of cool, right? So what we're going to do is try to change these variables so that we're going to hit the target, right? So we have an angle, and I'm going to make sure that my sound is muted so this doesn't interrupt us. We have an angle that I can change. You can see this white line here is the arc that the cannon will fire at. I can change this angle to something like this, and you'll see the arc will actually change. So I could change this to 50, and that arc is going to change. So the objective of this demo is to modify the variables so they contain the correct values to hit the target, right? And I just happen to know them off the top of my head, which is 40, I want to say 45, and I'm going to go 80, right? Okay, there, boom, I hit the target. Very cool, right? So we have these variables that hold a value and you change them and they can be used later. Now, in that example, you weren't able to see the behind the scenes where the variables were actually used. We'll get into that a little bit later. So what I'm gonna do, I'm in the Python editor. If you open this, you click the link in the description, it will look something like this. This is a Linux simulator terminal, right? So we have our main.py, we have the same file down here. You don't need all of this. I'm just gonna minimize this and collapse my file explorer. And I'm gonna delete everything in the editor. If you want to get it back, you can just hit the reset button here. So what we're going to do is let's create a variable called name. And I'll assign it to what my name is, Paul, and I'll print that. And I want to print name. So I'm just going to hit run and I'll bring this back up. Here we can see what's happening is I'm assigning a variable and I'm giving it a value, and then I'm using that variable down here later in the code. The thing about variables is that you can set it one time and then reuse it across your code. So if I change this to Joe, instead of printing Paul 3 times, it's going to print Joe 3 times. So this is what's called a string variable, which is anything inside of quotes. And I can determine that by wrapping this in parentheses and just printing the type. And that will tell me it is of the class str, which means it's a string. So it's always text. It can be inside of a single or double quotes. So I could change it to Joe in single quotes, hit run, and I'm going to get the same class object here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this type method, which again, if you're brand new to Python, type just means, hey, tell me what type of variable I'm dealing with, which is something you're going to want to remember for the future. So how would we use these kind of variables? Well, let's just say we want to take someone's name and someone's age. So let's say age equals 30, right? So we can print the name and we can print the age. And if I click run, we should get Joe, we should get 30, but we can also do what's called F strings. I'll explain how that works. So instead of doing two different lines, we can wrap this in quotes and prefix it with an F, and then wrap our variables inside a curly brace. And we can write a message like, hi, and then whatever the name is, you are, and then let's wrap age inside of this bracket. I'll click run, and it says, hi, Joe, you are 30. So if I change any of these values, I have, hi, Paul, you are 30. I can change it to 25. And you can kind of see how variables might be useful. You're setting it, declaring it at the top, and reusing it down below. Now, if I start, by the way, I'm hitting Shift and Alt the down arrow. You can also hold Alt in the up arrow and move stuff around. These are all Monaco, VS Code, and cursor shortcuts if you use cursor. You can use these variables across and be like, how does it feel to be whatever the age is? And then let's put in my name. Hit run. Okay, so we're reusing the variables across the script, and I don't have to change it in multiple places. Whereas if I did not use a variable, I would literally have to type in Joe and edit it across the script. Okay, and for those of you that care, I hit Shift Control D, sorry, to multi-select, and then you can type in a bunch of different spots at the same time. I hope those aren't confusing you. Don't let them confuse you. There's all kinds of VS Code shortcuts that I highly recommend that you learn if you want to be fast at writing code. Okay, so far we've talked about this is a string variable, and down here we have what's called an integer. But if you weren't sure, what you would do is print the type of age, and it will tell us it's an int or int. An integer is any whole number. We know that from basic math. The next that I would probably talk about is a float. So let's say we change it to 25.00. So what we're going to get is a float type. This is any decimal like value. Now, why would you use a float over an integer? Well, of course, if you have a decimal value. So you have a value like 25.75, for example, or maybe a very detailed number. Let me get rid of the type here so we can see the value being printed. This gives us more control over the number, whereas obviously an integer has to be a whole number. The next variable type that you have to understand are booleans. And this is true or false. You're going to use these all over the place, not just in Python, but any programming language that you use in the future. It's going to be all over the place. All right, so let's make a variable is cool underscore cool equals true. Now, with Python variables, the T needs to be capitalized. Now, this is because Python uses built-in keywords and it is capital case sensitive, rather. So true needs to be capitalized, right? So if I click run like this, we're going to get an error. And I apologize. I just realized halfway through I was on the dev site. So I realized I saw the little node icon here in the bottom left corner. Pardon me for that. But if I scroll down here, we see I get a name error and it says that true is not defined. And then it even tells me, did you mean true with a capital T? Yes, I actually did. So VS Code, Cursor, any kind of modern IDE will syntax highlight for you. So I can see right away that it changes to blue. That's kind of my indicator, right? So let's change printing age to printing the value is cool. And Joe is cool. So if I do again, let's type it and see what it is. Click run. It's going to be a bool or a boolean. Now, why is that useful? You can do what's called conditional statements. This isn't something that we need to get into too deep, but I'll just kind of briefly do it here for you. So if is cool, if it's true, print. Let's do an F string and let's say name is very cool. I'm going to do some shortcuts here. So I'm going to hit shift alt down arrow, up arrow, enter, backspace, else colon. And then I'm going to say is not cool at all. All right. So if we run this block, we get Joe is very cool. That is because is cool is set to true. If I change this to false and press run, I get Joe is not cool at all. And if your name's Joe, sorry about that. There's nothing personal. It's just name I picked. I'll change it to Paul. There we go. So Paul is not cool at all. So that's where Booleans come into play. They're conditional variables that you can kind of branch your code, your logic, and make decisions based on the value of your Boolean variable. Okay, now let's talk about naming your variables. These are what I would consider to be soft skills, but it's going to make your life a lot easier, and you're frankly going to be more liked at the workplace if you do follow these principles I'm about to talk about. I'm going to shrink down my output here, and I want to talk to you about what do you name variables. So let's say if we have a variable like student underscore count. And let's say there's 30 students in whatever class we're working on. I'll print it, which isn't really necessary for this example, but I'll click run. Okay, I can look at this code. I would consider this self-documenting, right? Now, if I was to rename this to something like SC for student count and hit print, it works. Everything works exactly the same way. But when I'm coming back, I cannot tell what SC stands for. You can do something like SC equals student count. Save yourself and everybody else a headache and just name your variables with underscores and call it student count. The other thing that I want to mention is that we should not start or cannot start variables with a number. So if I try to say 1 students or something like that, and I'll even type it wrong, doesn't matter. If I click run, I'm going to get an error. If we scroll down here, invalid decimal literal, that's because you cannot start your variable names with a number. The other no-nos are using Python keywords. So for example, I can make a variable called true and name it Paul, and I can print that, right? That's going to work, but I cannot name that true with a capital T. Why? Because that is a Python keyword. I could also not name it print, right? That's not going to work because those are Python keywords. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just take these back. Go back to my terminal. Okay, so that's basically a quick crash course on Python variables. If you're interested in learning Python, I definitely recommend you check out Server Academy. We have a lot of these type of interactive examples, and we're bringing more of these Python style of games to the platform. So if you're interested, check it out, and I'll see you in the next video.